just right there, the tone of their voice communicates something. And so that's when you might say, hey, do you have time to talk? Because you automatically assume that they're answering the phone, so that's a message that they're willing to talk, but then the tone of their voice communicates that they don't seem interested, so you're getting that mixed message, so you're trying to clarify, hey, is this a bad time? Do you have time to talk? Often, arousal is expressed with facial expressions or with animation. And basically, you can think of arousal as an on-off switch. So you're either going to have it turned on and you very clearly communicate that you're interested and you're responding, or it goes off and it's very clear that you're not interested at all. Okay, and then dominance. The dominance in nonverbal communication communicates status, position, and importance. And these are implicit cues of power in a relationship. So the way that you may see dominance exhibited is through body posture. So you might have someone that's very relaxed versus someone who's very stiff. And so the dominance cues are communicated, and you're going to have very different impression of the power and the position in the relationship based on your body posture. The use of space. Often high status is associated with more space. So if you think about the size of someone's office, if you think about the head of a conference room table, there are always more, bigger spaces with people of higher status. If you think about clothing, you can definitely communicate dominance through clothing. Think of someone in jeans versus someone in a business suit. The level of dominance communicated is very different. And then eye contact. You either increase eye contact or you stare to establish power. And there's that let's see who can not blink the longest contest. And the person that wins always feels like they were really victorious, because the person that looks away or blinks first apparently gave in, is the impression. So if you're thinking about dominance, if you want to dominate someone and communicate power and status and importance, you stare them down and they look away, and that automatically, non-verbally, establishes you as the more dominant person. So if we want to improve our ability to interpret nonverbal cues, I have a few more slides to kind of drive that point home. So we interpret messages by how we expect someone to behave and by adapting to other people's behaviors. And we've kind of talked about that a little bit before. So as we receive all these nonverbals, we are interpreting them based on how we expect them to behave and by adapting to their behaviors. Okay, now, it may be related to personality traits. So we can't exclude the nature element here of nature versus nurture, because there are certain personalities that have a greater ability to interpret or who communicate nonverbally differently. Those who express feelings more commonly are better at interpreting nonverbals. And that makes sense, because if you are in tune enough with your own feelings and you express your feelings readily, you will be better at interpreting when other people express feelings. So if you are a very expressive, emotionally driven person, you are probably better at interpreting nonverbal cues. If you are skilled in one area, you are more accurate in others. Meaning if you're really, really good at reading people's facial expressions, you probably have more accuracy in reading movements or gestures or eye contact or body posturing or one of those other areas. Also, if you're extroverted, if you have high self-esteem, or if you're expressive, you tend to be better at interpreting nonverbal cues. So again, personality does play a role in this, but everybody can learn skills to get better. So if you consider nonverbal cues in context, that's very helpful. So remember, it's often situational or environmental. So consider the nonverbal cues based on that person in that situation. You can look for clusters of nonverbal cues. Remember, I said often, you'll have 3 or 4 nonverbal cues hit you almost all at once. So look for clusters, because that helps you categorize and make sense of things. Consider the past experiences of the person and of your own past experiences when you're interpreting nonverbal cues, because that influences the interpretation. And another thing you can do is check your perceptions with others. So, you have this impression of a situation or a conversation or a person, and run that by somebody that you trust and someone that will tell you the truth, and say, hey, look, I'm just curious, what do you think? This happened, or this was said, or this was done, and this is what I thought about it. Do you agree or disagree? And be aware that nonverbal expression of emotion is contagious. We talked about that. And look for cues that may communicate lying. And we talked about that table on 179 about the cues into deception. So look for cues that can communicate lying, because that's a skill that you have to practice. Okay, so that is all of the material, which I know was a little overwhelming, but this is your last activity that we will do for this week. There are 3 scenarios. You can choose any of the 3. And this is the other thing that needs to go in your post. So the first activity, I'll actually go back to it so I can refresh your memory, but make sure you do the first activity, and then this will be the other thing that you put in your reflection post. So there are 3 scenarios. You can choose any of the 3 and just answer the question based on the situation. So Greg's situation is, he has been told that he sometimes comes across as cold, aloof, and standoffish. So that's the scenario. What could Greg do to communicate his sincere desire to be warm and approachable? So that's scenario number 1. Donald really wants to be hired as a salesperson. He hires a fashion consultant to recommend what he should wear and determine how he should look when he interviews for the job. So the question is, in general, is it ethical to manipulate your appearance so you can impress others? That's scenario number 2. And scenario number 3, is it ethical for salespeople, politicians, or others who wish to make favorable impressions to alter their nonverbal messages to get you to like them, vote for them, or buy their products? And I'll read that one again because it's a little bit more complex. Is it ethical for salespeople, politicians, or others who wish to make favorable impressions? Is it ethical for them to alter their nonverbal messages to get you to like them, vote for them, or buy their products? And explain your perspective. So, Greg's scenario, you can choose him, you can choose Donald, or you can choose just the universal question as a whole of, is that ethical or not? And I'll quickly go back and remind you of the other activity. Determine the nonverbal behaviors that can be interpreted universally and without question. So once you have your list, I would like you to post your top 3 choices. So that will be your activity for the week, your top 3 universal behaviors, and then answering one of those 3 questions at the end. Finally, one last thing, I actually don't have it pulled up, but in the assignments section, I posted a document. You don't need to do anything with it, but I just thought it would be helpful for you to have. It's actually cultural specific nonverbal responses. It's just kind of a summary that I drew up for you, and it just has specific to culture, the way different cultures respond and react, and it's just kind of interesting, and it goes along with the chapter. So you don't need to do anything with it, but please at least look at it, and if you wanted to reflect about something that you found interesting in that document, you're more than welcome to do that as well, because that is part of the weekly material. So reflect from the lecture, reflect from the book, or reflect from that worksheet, and it's listed under nonverbal communication, I think, under assignments. So that is all for this week. Make sure that you complete your Chapter 5 quiz and do your post, and I look forward to reading them and getting back to you with the results and my thoughts on those. So thanks so much. Have a great week.